Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants, all the delegates who are joining the first oneM2M International Web Conference on IoT, the journey to massive IoT through interoperable and open systems. I'm Bindu Srivastava, currently serving as the Marcom Chair of oneM2M. I'm delighted to have you all join us. We are running this conference in the hybrid mode. So we are joining, we have several delegates and speakers joining us from Pangyo, the TTA premises in Pangyo, where the technical plenary meeting number 57 is also being held. And we have a few speakers who were not able to make it to Korea, joining us online from various parts of the world. Thank you very much for making time for this conference. Before we start, I'll make some hygiene announcements because this is a hybrid conference. All the attendees would be kept in the mute mode. And if you have any questions, please type them in the questions tab. The chat option is will not work in this particular tool, but please type out your questions and comments in the questions tab. Speakers are requested to kindly deliver the presentations within the allotted time, which I know they will. This conference will be recorded, and the recording will be uploaded on the event website after a few days. I hope the speakers do not have a problem in our recording the conference proceedings. If anybody has any concerns, they can reach out to the organizers, and we will help address your concerns. Thank you. Here is I'll give you a brief about the conference. Basically, this conference is meant to highlight the features of oneM2M with respect to the standards roadmap, the standardization roadmap that it has followed over the last 10 years. It will also showcase some typical products, platforms, solutions from places across the world. This is the plan for day one today. We meet again tomorrow from 4 to 6 p.m. again at the same time, where we will cover typical deployments and also talk about certification ecosystem around oneM2M. So with this, we begin the proceedings for today. We are delighted to have Dr. Casey Koo, Vice President, Telecom Technology Association, the host to this conference, joining us in person. And I would please invite Dr. Koo to kindly make the opening remarks. Before that, I'll just give a brief introduction to Dr. Koo. Dr. Koo is a Vice President of the Telecommunications Technology Association in South Korea. He has been involved in the field of ICT standardization for over 30 years. He started his work in 1992 as a researcher at ETRI. In 2001, he moved to the TTA for improving the standardization system of Korea. He has played an important delegation role in international standardization meetings such as ITU-PP, WTSA, ITU-T, TSAG, etc. He has also engaged at the Global Standards Collaboration, CJK, the China-Japan-Korea Forum, JT meetings, 3GPP PCGOP 2019 and 2022 as Vice Chairman, and as oneM2M Head of Delegation. Thank you very much, Dr. Koo, for making time. Kindly deliver your opening address.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. Morning. My name is Koo, Vice President of the Okay, thank you much. It's nice. Very detailed introduction. It's very nice. Thank you very much, Madam Bindu. First of all, on behalf of TTA, I would like to thank you very much for joining the oneM2M International Conference, the journey to massive IoT to interoperable and open standards, alongside the 7th oneM2M especially, I would like to thank distinguished expert Dr. Laurent here, and TP Chair, and Ms. Enrico Scarone as Chair, and Madame Bindu over there, and actually my colleagues, over there, and Javel. Yeah. I actually for 3 years, we just met via Zoom. So in this time, I very much appreciate your in person here to be a whole TTA. Anyway, and another my colleagues, even though I met the first time, but thank you very much in person here. Okay, as you said, this is the 10th birthday of the oneM2M. Yes, so take this opportunity. I congratulations on the oneM2M, the very big achievement. Actually, the truth I have to say is that the success of the oneM2M is your great player important role in the oneM2M activity. And this is my work. And when it comes to this conference, we will share some experiences in the implementation of the oneM2M, especially. I think that the standards of the oneM2M specification is just mature and high advanced, but the important thing is testing and certification. This is the good place for testing and certification, followed by this TP57 meeting next week. Maybe TTA will offer and give some experience and testing tools like that. And last but not least, we are about to ratify, tomorrow, release 4 specification at the plenary, maybe leading by the Lord. I think that this is one of the significant outcome and milestone in over the 10 years. Actually, I think that the congratulations in the first. Okay, I wish our cooperation and endeavor continue to all of you. I see it's really here. Anyway, thank you very much again in coming to Korea. Unfortunately, from yesterday, the temperature became below the 0, but the weather is good still. Please enjoy the good weather and enjoy the Korean culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kuhn, for highlighting that this is the 10th birthday of oneM2M, and the fact that we are about to ratify release 4, and we have the oneM2M framework is already matured tremendously, that we are now at release 4. Plus, we have a healthy testing and compliance ecosystem for which the interop will happen next week. Thank you very much, Dr. Kuhn, for your remarks. We now begin with the technical proceedings. We now begin the technical proceedings of the conference. I would like to invite Roland to kindly give an overview of oneM2M over the years and its release in the standards ecosystem. Roland works at the T-Mobile International Austria in the standards, patents and OSPO team in group technology of Deutsche Telekom, where he is responsible for standardization activities in the service domain. He was elected to the oneM2M technical plenary chair position in 2018 and re-elected in 2020. Before that, he served as a vice chair of the technical plenary for 2 terms from 2014 onwards. In fact, Roland is one of the oldest veteran, longest.
But youngest in mind.
Youngest in mind, still very young. So he's been involved with oneM2M from the very first TP. So thank you, Roland. Over to you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for this kind introduction. And yeah, you're right, my hair is white, and I've attend the TP meetings in oneM2M since the very first one. This is now for 10 years. Before I start with the overview, I would like to thank TTA and Dr. for this kind invitation to host the TP meeting here, and not only the TP meeting, but also the interoperability meeting next weekend. As you mentioned before, I think this is really one important part of the oneM2M specifications development, that we have also the interoperability testing, the compliance testing, and the certification program, and it all started here. So I would like to thank TTA very, very much for this support, and also for the hosting. And yeah, we can keep with the temperatures. I come from a country where we are used to that in winter, so but we don't have sun usually in that of the period in time in the year. So this is a benefit to be here. Thanks a lot. Now I will go to the presentation. I'll start with the organizational overview of the partnership project. I guess many of you are aware oneM2M as such is not a legal entity. It's a partnership project by the standardization organizations throughout the regions, North America, with ATIS, TTA, ETSI in Europe, TSTSI in India, CCSA in China, TTA here in Korea, and TTC in Japan. It was founded, as we heard, 10 years ago. And in 2012, and exactly in September of this year, we had the first GP meeting. The idea from the very first moment was to join forces in developing a global standard and horizontal framework for the M2M at that time, nowadays IoT. So also the naming changes throughout the years, but still the idea and the concept remain the same. And the overall goal is to reduce fragmentation, and at that time when we started also to reuse existing standards that were there, and like for example the device management technologies that have been there, or integrate existing technologies, as we come into that later, like this smart device template that was initially started in HGI. We have also partners like Global Platform, and we have also a very close relationship to ITUT, in particular study group 20, who transposed release 2. Having said that, so recap the 10 years. Here is the key events timeline, where you see several activities are done in oneM2M. The first one, which is marked with the red bullets, is the specification development. And as it was also mentioned before, at this meeting we will ratify release 4 in this series. The blue marked events on top represent the interoperability testing events, and as you can see now, we have one event next week, and it's the 8th event in the series. You see also this this period in time where not much happened. We all know why. We were restricted in movements and restricted in sometimes also in the collaboration work. So we did it virtually, but I think for some of the activities we treat here, it's very good to have these face-to-face exchanges to discuss in depth progress. What you also see are the black colored events, that the so-called industry events, where we did regional reach out and to discuss and exchange on use cases with regards to M2M and IoT. And last but not least, on the last line, or the line below, marks the start and the current status of the certification program. And as you can see here, beginning of 2017, TTA started the certification program, and now since 2019, this is done by the Global Certification Forum. And several other activities. And on the right bottom, you see one of the latest publications that we did. Besides the specifications, these are the sustainability IoT features. It's a white paper issued by the sustainability group of the steering committee. So it's also worth reading. Next slide, please. Very brief, the concept of oneM2M. It was defined to break down the silos as mentioned. Usually you had a typical implementation or also deployments within a certain so-called vertical deployment where you specific to your application also defined a whole stack of protocols in order to support the use case you have in mind. So the goal of with the problem that you have to reinvent the things again and again, and also it's not easy to exchange across those verticals information, data, and the reuse even existing infrastructure. Next time. So the idea and concept of oneM2M was to introduce specified service software framework, which we call the service layer, which is horizontal to all of these vertical use cases and applications, and also abstracts and hides the connectivity layer underneath, which transports the data that are. So it's a very specific, even proprietary technologies towards the wide area networks that are specified in 3GPP. The next slide, please. I very briefly would like to provide you with a high-level concept of the architecture to introduce you to the. As I said, we have this common service layer. So we call it a common service entity, which is marked here in red. Underneath the application layer, on top of the connectivity layer. I think it needs a few clicks. Sorry. Next one. Yeah, that's good. And this common service layer can be deployed across multiple infrastructure. As it's depicted here, you have the main common services entity, so deployed on the infrastructure node or in the cloud. You might have a CSE on a gateway or middle node, or you might have it also additionally on a device. And the applications can are connected or communicate via this service layer with the EN CSE, and on top you might have on the infrastructure side another application, which is this application layer can handle the specific use cases with regard to a certain vertical domain or across these domains. And it's an end-to-end deployment is possible from including sensor device data towards the infrastructure. We also have defined several interworkings so that different access technologies can be interworked with, and different existing technologies can be integrated into your oneM2M deployment. Highlighted here are also two main reference points from the service layer towards the application, which is called the MCA, so CSE to application entity, and one reference point from one CSE to the other CSE, which is called MCC. And there's also the definition of a reference point between two service providers, which would be called as MCC prime, where you can even cross the service providers domains. Those reference points are defined via different protocol bindings, as it's mentioned here, HTTP, MQTT, CoAP, or WebSocket. The next Slide, please. The next slide shows the common service functions that are currently defined within such a common service entity that comprise services that are needed across horizontal to all these vertical deployments and serve different use cases. It's called here the Common Services Toolkit, which is another flexibility that is provided by oneM2M. Not every common service entity needs to have to implement it, all of these common service functions. It's deployment specific, so you can start small and increase. You might also differentiate between gateway or device based CSE towards an infrastructure CSE. And I come to some of the functions later on. I need to look at the time. So next slide, please. How do we derive these common service functions, and why we think it's horizontal? It all starts, as it's depicted here, with use cases from different domains. We discuss these use cases. They are brought in by different stakeholders, and we derive the main requirements that would be needed for such an horizontal service layer, and define those requirements in the requirements document. There's this technical specification 0002. And from there, besides these use cases, we might also have different studies which are also documented in technical reports. And these together define where we start to define the service architecture of oneM2M, and from this also protocol aspects and other specifications required or needed to specify the interworking, to specify device management, to specify protocol bindings, and also the specification like TS23 where we define the smart device template. Come to that later. This set of specifications is grouped, and a consistent set, if sufficiently mature, is called a release. And as you saw before, we started with release 1, and now we are at release 4. I come to the difference a little bit later. If the oneM2M ratifies such an release, this means that these specifications are, after an editorial check, ready to be published by the partners of 3GPP, of oneM2M. Similar to 3GPP, that is what I wanted to say. And you see this is listed here, so all these partners are now able to publish these specifications as set of their partner specifications. And then they can be treated regionally and became national or regional norms and standards. But in addition to the, as I said before, in addition to the specification of these building this standard, there's also the interoperability testing, where this interoperability testing between different implementations, but as well conformance testing towards the standard is being performed. And another main point in this ecosystem of oneM2M is certainly the certification program. As I mentioned before, initially started 2017 here. With TTA as a certification body, and now treated by GC. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the development of releases over the year. You see, the functionality is growing, and also the enhancements of these functionalities is increasing. At one point, it's an enhancement of the existing functionalities. On the other hand, it's additional functionalities based on use cases. additional use cases or additional support of interworkings or protocol bindings. I didn't want to go into much detail here. I have to say it's too far away to read for me personally, but I can, as you see, that the basic release was the first release. It was important to derive and define the initial concept where to start with, and it took some time to arrive on a common view. So you see here some main or major initial specifications. They have been developed and increased, enhanced with additional functionalities in release 2. So I would rather mean that release 2 is a very good release to cope with or to serve most of the use cases that you can find today. In release 3, we enhanced functionalities more or less on the semantic part. We also enhanced the interworking with 3GPP SCF style interfaces and some other interworkings, as you see here, with OCF, COA, and OSGI were discussed, studied, and specifications for technical reports were derived from that. Conformance testing and profiles were introduced with release 3. We hear later from the security functionalities, enhancements to the security were also part of release 3 and the ontology-based interworking. Release 4 now brings additional functionalities, and I'd like to quickly go through some of them. I might not be able to get through all of them, but I would highlight a few. In this slide set, you find several of these explained, and I think it's in a way that you can easily go through by yourself if you don't manage to treat them all now today. On the next slide, I'd like to highlight the feature which we call the Smart Device Template 4.0. Next slide, please. Which is a template method used to model capabilities, information models, and semantics of connected devices. In short, it provides an abstraction layer for these connected devices, and it also was enhanced. So it started together with other organizations, and it was derived from an existing organization to oneM2M, and together with other organizations like OCF, oneM2M release 3 defined several module classes, 84 module classes and 15 classes. And in release 4, we restructured this smart device template to become more horizontal, so it fits all the so-called vertical domains. It started with the home, but now it expands through several of these domains. I don't want to go into much detail. You see that the conceptual figure of how this is organized at the slide. If we go to the next slide, I'll highlight a few of the domains. I think it's not even complete. We might have a management domain in addition. But you see that there's a common domain that includes most of the module classes defined. So it's, let's say, more than 100, 170, 19 device models. Additional, you see the next big thing was the home domain. And then in addition, there is the health domain, railway domain, agricultural domain, industry, vehicle, and as I said, I think there's also management domain and more. So please have a look at the TS23, where you can see all these domains, device models, module classes defined. The next slide, I start to go through some of the features. I would like to start with an introduction to the oneM2M entities that we might use, understanding the need to understand the functionalities. So in principle, we are talking about devices on the left, infrastructure node in the middle, and an application on top of it. Please. Let's check. Another one. So we have set the middle node or the infrastructure node. The CSE, the common service entity, now resides on this infrastructure node. You have the application on the right, called AE1, which is the application management portal umbrella. And on the left side, you have the devices with the application entity called AE2 to AE4. And in the CSE, you have the CSE source tree in order to store metadata data of applications and devices. AE is application entity, CSE common service entity, etc. This is the concept at a very high level, but it shows some of the details. And with that, I try to provide you some insights in some of the functionalities. And please do stop me if I'm too long timing-wise. Next slide. On the next slide, I'll start with the GeoQuery, which is new in release 4. Same concept. You have the S4 as before, the devices with some of their geodata, and the CSE base. Those devices register, or these applications register to the CSE, and with that, the CSE base tree is populated, as you can see. And if now, if you click on the, if now the application on the management application, AE1 sends such a GeoQuery request to discover, for example, in this case, temperature sensors in New York City, then the CSE looks up the locations within the tree and matches the GeoQuery criteria and will respond. Next slide, one more click. Accordingly, so that the GeoQuery is responded. And if you go to the next slide, we will have another service that was introduced in release 4. In this case, a process management service, where, as you can see, there's an application entity can offload to a CSE a process that the CSE performs on the application's behalf. Starts with a create process, create request, so create the process management with some attributes and information attached to it. And such a process consists of a set of states and actions. The CSE can now monitor start-stop conditions to determine if when to perform such a process. And while performing the process, the CSE transitions to individual process states. It's described here and based on the decision criteria and perform actions. As we can see here now, unlock the door. The door lock is the second application. And I'd like to, in the course of timing, we can now jump to next slide. So it's all these features are described here, and I think this is work not done by myself. This work was done by Dale Seed some time ago when we initially did a presentation where we provided an insight in what will come up with release 4. So he did it for several of the functionalities. So please go further. Software campaigning, also software campaigning might be a very good feature also to support use cases in conjunction with what we also discussed, how to interwork, for example, or collaborate with NCI SGMEC, these edge deployments. Next slide. I think it's always the same. So you have always the application, the requests, and how this is treated in the CSE, what is done by the CSE, how the information is stored, and how the actions are processed. The semantic. Next one. Here's one of the interworkings that is introduced, so that there's an I think it's a good example where you can see how interworking with proprietary, whatever other technologies is defined. So you have an application, it's called the IPE, that resides on a gateway that is connected via this other technology that you would like to interwork with. And this application, this IPE, is registered to the CSE, and now you have, as you recall from the other applications, the CSE base tree reflects the data and information collected by the IP, and the IP is specific to the interworking technology. So from the AE1 side, there is this application doesn't need not know that there is another technology so can handle the data and manage data. Next slide. Yeah, some additional functionalities in conjunction or in collaboration with the 3GPP network. There's an 3GPP interworking defined, and here you see how this message could be related to. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is why I asked to go quickly through it. Otherwise, we would have needed 2 hours. But it's in the slide set, and I think it's to a high extent self-explaining to at least get an idea of what these functions are and these features are. And this is the set as a subset of these 4 new features. Next slide, please. Security enhancement. We come to the security. Reno will explain the security in a separate talk today. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's also same discovery-based operations. Yeah, I'd like to yeah, what's next? After this, if you read through these new features of release 4, I think it describes well the delta to release 3. What's next? What is on our plate? And the next slide gives a high-level overview. So the future feature development, release 5 has been started, and with TRs, studies, use case discussion, and also requirements development. We are still in the so-called stage 1, where we exactly discuss in this area. Some of the work items I've listed here are topics that are covered by these work items. So as you see, the AI enablement, how or what is the role of oneM2M, how to enable AI is a big discussion here. What enhancements should be made in order to better serve those applications, this AI applications that might use or get data via oneM2M towards these applications, what is needed to do that. Then the information model enhancements are briefly introduced, the concept of this multi-device template. So there are additional, as you can see, with additional domains, new domains, additional aspects could come in. What I didn't highlight when I discussed it the idea is that you have modules, some functionalities or features described that you can reuse and rebuild new devices, for example, from you take a switch or some volume sensor. Then these functionalities, in principle, might be used from different use cases from different devices, so that this, as I said, this device template allows you to model all these different devices. If there is now a need for a new one, if it's not yet covered, then this is the enhancement of the smart device template. What we also discussed right now is to enhance device management or use the smart device template device management. In addition, we have discussions on the support of data protection regulations, as we have it here with people or other regulations, the original, what is needed to support these regulations. GR is being finalized today, so it will, the study and will be part of release 4, but the actual specification part that might be required is part of release 5. Then support of data license management, important feature for handling data from different sources and understanding under which license I can do that, and to handle this automatically. This is the task, is to better understand the specific needs. This is the topic of this work item. Smart city and enterprise domain enablement enhancements. It's much related to what we discussed before, to see what are additional requests from specific domains. A workshop that we held this week, maintained by the RDM group and chaired by Shane and Andrew from Hanson University, is the enablement of IoT in the metaverse. This is also more kind of study. What is the metaverse? What is IoT? How that relates? What updates might be needed? All this discussion is now ongoing. It has started this week. And some specific enhancements, so advanced discovery, for example, additional interworkings as the interworking with the UGC sensor thing API, and additional enhancements. It was briefly mentioned in the picture overview, the effective IoT communication to protect 3GPP networks. It's related to work that was already done also in GSMA, but how to better support or collaborate with the underlying networks, in this case, in particular. All these will lead to technical reports and requirements, and in future also enhancements to the existing technical specifications or new technical specifications if required. And this is more or less the end of the content. I have, I think, two more slides. The next slide show you or invites you to play around with oneM2M. There was a huge effort to provide oneM2M tutorials for self-study. You can, it's online now. You have the links here. You have descriptions how to use that. There are videos that explain the use, so can get an easy starting to play around with oneM2M. It provides an implementation of a CSE, and everything is there to learn how to use oneM2M. And on the next slide, I think I have only a few more links to information about oneM2M and also to all the technical specifications. And with that, I would like to end this presentation. And yeah, I needed more time that I had. And but yeah, thank you very much for having this chance. And yeah, this presentations.
Thank you, Roland, for giving that very comprehensive overview. While oneM2M framework aims to simplify life for people who are going to use IoT M2M systems, the 17 common service functions that just got demonstrated, that were mentioned, developing them has taken a lot of effort and consistent participation in technical plenary meetings. The beauty of oneM2M, as per me, is as these common service functions get evolved, get enriched with more and more features, the oneM2M framework system is keeping up with evolving technologies. Like you mentioned, in release 5, we are now talking about AI and metaverse. Apart from that, it's also oneM2M recognizes other forums, other standards, and interworkings are also being worked upon. So that is a very nice way of a mechanism by which we are coexisting with existing standards, as well as ensuring that IoT M2M applications can be adopted in a very simple manner by people who need not understand the complexities of this whole framework. Thank you very much, Roland, for your speech. If you have any questions in the tab as of now.
There are no questions yet, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Asif, for confirming that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. And now we will have a brief talk on the security aspects in oneM2M by Reena. Reena Kamil is the IoT Ecosystem Architecture Solution Manager at British Telecom. She is currently also the Vice Chair of Working Party 1 at the ITU-T SG20, IoT in Smart Cities and Communities. Before moving to the architecture and technology strategy area, Reena was a security consultant, providing consultancy across BT's all CFUs. Reena represents BT in oneM2M, 3GPP, and the ITU-T. So Reena has over a decade of experience in research in academia and the telecommunications industry. Over to you, Reena.
Hello, thank you very much, Bindu. And yeah, sorry, I was trying to fit into the square area, the camera. I'm sorry, I'll be sitting. I'm not as healthy as Roland. I'm recovering from a cold, so apologies in advance if my voice is a little bit unclear. So we can start with the presentation. And before starting, I would really like to thank TTA and Dr. Wu for hosting us. It was a fantastic meeting in Korea, and we are all very pleased to be here. And also thanks a lot to TSDSI for hosting hosting this conference. Always happy to talk to TSDSI. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So at the beginning of the presentation, we will be talking a little bit about oneM2M. Roland has done the majority of the talk. I don't have much to do, but I have a few slides about oneM2M. So 40% of economic impact of IoT requires interoperability between IoT systems, which is what oneM2M strongly provides. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So an integrated solution is needed. The market at the moment is highly fragmented with small vendor-specific or sector-specific solutions. What happens is reinventing the wheels. The same services are developed over and over again. We are, 1 second, sorry, small technical issue. We'll be back. Okay. So there is limited communication and high integration costs. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So why do we use oneM2M? It is the only standard du jour dedicated to enable horizontal IoT integration, it offers data management, data historization, and information sharing. It is very dynamic, provides dynamic privacy and access control. It is very secure, provides with multiple security levels, which we will be talking about shortly. It provides storage and exposure for historical data, data search and integration, dynamic data, native device management, designs for interconnecting frameworks. One second, I'm having a technical issue here. Semantic enabled to share information, and it is simple to use, the core functions, and know your development architecture. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So diversity is the richness that allows evolution and innovation, but fragmentation is the enemy that delays and blocks developments. So what oneM2M does is simplifying the environment, removing the unnecessary duplicated solutions, economy of scale. It preserves the necessary opportunity solutions, specializations by providing internetworking. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So oneM2M supports the developers community by accelerating the development of IoT. It transfers competition from integration and platforms to services, unlocking the market. It helps reduce the cost due to silos approach and its management, and it enables inter-technology and inter-domain data sharing, generating new services and new business opportunities. So it reduces the platform development and integration costs and enlarges the markets by enabling real competition on services. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So oneM2M specifies a distributed software or middle layer sitting between applications and underlying communications. It bridges communication technologies like fixed, narrowband IoT, 5G, 4G, and LoRa, internetworking using existing solutions and data models, and data management. It also allows to annotate data and semantic descriptions. Most importantly, oneM2M is a global standard, so it's not controlled by a single private company. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So oneM2M standard is based on a store and share resource, resource REST-based paradigm. The data may be made available in the platform to other applications. Interested applications are notified by means of subscription. Privacy is ensured by a strict access control management, which relies on underlying network security, providing a secure light solution. And it is heavily reusing underlying network functionalities, like Roland mentioned earlier. It has a strong internetworking framework designed to connect the different IoT technologies. Can we move on to the next slide, please? oneM2M integrates the vertical silos, which was covered by Roland earlier. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So we have our requirements, technical, which is technical reports and technical specs. Next slide, please. So security in oneM2M release 2 to release 4. We have some important documents like device configuration, TS0022, security solutions. I strongly recommend reading this document, TS0003. We also have a document for MEF and MAF interfaces, TS0032. Security Solutions document TS0003 was recently transposed by the ITUT SG20. It's a very comprehensive document and contains a lot of security functions in details, data about these security functions. In this presentation, we will be going through some of these functions, but of course, due to time, we will not have the time to, due to the limited time, we won't have the time to explain all of them in detail, but we will go through the main ones over the next few slides. Some of our security functions are, I'm sorry, can we still stay on the previous slide, please? Yes, thank you. So enrollment services, secure communication services, access control and authorization services. Can we move on to the next slide now, please? Thank you. So the secure environment concept abstracts the security implementation. It exposes common services to the applications depending on the implementation. It provides common interface for remote security administration if needed. oneM2M supported implementations distinguish 4 security levels. So the first one is no additional security, devices otherwise protected from attacks. This is applied when the network is trusted. Second one is software-only security, like white box crypto. This is applied when there is vulnerability to sufficiently motivated attackers. It is acceptable when compromise is not critical. The third level is trusted execution environment, TEE, relying on the main CPU hardware. It's a good barrier against software-based attacks and sufficient for remotely accessible but not physically exposed devices. Fourth one is tamper-resistant hardware embedded secure element. This is required to protect secrets when devices are physically exposed to attacker, like SPA and DP. It is used to protect unattended devices against cloning. This is a very high security level. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So summary of release 2 and release 4 security features. This slide has some features in management, market adoption, oneM2M as generic networking framework for 3GPP, ONA, DDS, etc. In terms of security, we have dynamic authorization, end-to-end security, enrollment and authentication APIs, distributed authentication, decentralized authentication, interoperable privacy profiles, and secure environment abstraction, which is a very wide range of features. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So oneM2M provides a common set of security capabilities to secure IoT devices and applications and prevent and mitigate attacks. It exposes an abstracted set of security-related APIs to help simplify security for IoT devices and applications. Again, we can see in the middle of the diagram some of the functions: enrollment and provisioning, message security, authentication, dynamic authorization, privacy policy manager, PPM, and end-to-end security, which we will be having a look at over the next few slides. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so security in oneM2M release 2 to release 4. The main functions supported are identification and authentication. Identification is checking if the identity of the requested originator provided for authentication is valid. Authentication is validating if the identity supplied in the identification step is associated with a trustworthy credential. The next one is the security association establishment. So establishment of a security context between communicating entities to provide confidentiality, like encryption, and integrity. And a range of authentication options are also supported. And we have authorization, access control, which is authorizing services and data access to authenticated entities. We also have remote provisioning. Can we move on to the next set of slides, please? Next slide. Additional functions are identity protection, the capability to use pseudonyms to protect the anonymity of transactions, sensitive data handling. It's a capability to protect sensitive data like local credentials and functions in a secure environment, as in smart cards or virtual smart cards. We also have security administration related to device management. It creates and administers dedicated secure environments and post-provisioning of master credentials. Can we move on to the next slide, please? We will be talking briefly about a few of these features without getting too technical. So enrollment and provisioning, onboarding. So onboarding, we will be talking about 4 features. Do we have the time, Bindu, go through these slides?
Just briefly.
Okay, very briefly. So we have enrollment and provisioning, onboarding. It's the procedure of bringing IoT field devices into operation in an IoT network. It must cope with a large variety of field devices, types and services, like the provider's business models. oneM2M has specified an M2M enrollment function, MEF, which enables stakeholders to set up their preferred onboarding and enrollment mechanisms in an interoperable way. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is again enrollment and provisioning. More details are available in this set of slides and also in TS0003 document, which has a description of all features and details. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now we have M2M enrollment function, MEF. Can we move on to the previous slide, please? Yes, MEF. So it allows 3 types of remote security: symmetric key authentication, RSPF, certificate authenticated RSPF, and GBA authenticated RSPF. In this case, the MEF is the bootstrapping service function and 3GPP generic bootstrapping architecture. I'll skip the rest for the sake of time. We can we move on to the next slide, please? We have the message security between adjacent entities, the operational security framework. These diagrams describe how the function works and how authentication is carried out. We can move on to the next slide, please. Authorization and access control. So as we mentioned earlier, oneM2M is based on a RESTful architecture. API is based on requests to perform an operation on a resource. Operations are create, retrieve, update, and delete. oneM2M service layer supports configurable access control policies that define clear roles dictating for each resource who is authorized to access, what operations are allowed, and under which conditions, like the time and the location of the entity. Can we move on to the next slide, please? The diagram explains the function further. Can we move on to the next slide, please? I think we only have dynamic authorization left and privacy policy manager. I'll try to be brief. Dynamic authorization. We have this diagram describing how dynamic authorization works. So the originator or hosting CSE requests authorization of the originator, provides by a dynamic authorization system, DAS. The direct dynamic authorization, the hosting CSE submits a request to DAS and the originator not communicating with the DAS server. There is an indirect dynamic authorization, and there is a third type where the DAS has multiple options for authorization, like issue and update access control rules, assign roles to the originator, and issue the JSO and web tokens, JWT. Can we move on to the next slide, please? The last function that we have here is the privacy policy manager, PPM. So can we move on? The diagram here describes how the PPM works. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So PPM is a personal data management framework. The PPM converts the user's privacy preference into access control information in order to protect the user's personally identifiable information, PII, from being accessed by unauthorized parties. Access control information consists of static and dynamic access control policies, ACP. The PPM uses a terms and conditions markup language to derive consensus between the user's privacy preferences and applications, and also the service provider's policies. This is the last one that we have for today. The diagrams explain everything in this presentation, and also, again, I strongly recommend going through TS0003 document, which has details about all our security functions and diagrams. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And the slide that we can have, there's a link to our developer's guide, which was mentioned by Roland earlier. Can we move on to the last slide, please? We have lots of, the one before that, we have a lot of available resources, the developers guides, technical questions, published specification, documents developed, webinars, a YouTube channel, and also a link for our upcoming events, which are available online to access online. So we would be very happy if more people join our events. If you have any questions about the security functions or any aspects of oneM2M security, please feel free to reach out by email. And thank you very much once again for hosting us to TTA and to TSDSI. Always a pleasure to talk to TSDSI. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For asking to talk very succinctly because of paucity of time. And just to clarify, this conference is being run under the aegis of oneM2M, and TSDSI colleagues are assisting along with the TTA colleagues in running this conference. So with this we come to the end of the part 1 of the conference, which was about the overall oneM2M framework.